Good afternoon. My name is Annie Lord. I'm the executive director at Miami Homes for All and delighted to be your host today for the program that is uh, going to present the new work by the University of Miami's Office of Civic and Community Engagement. I'm super proud to be here today and discussing and helping to present the wonderful information and work that the office has been doing to discuss the intersection between housing affordability and climate change, the two things that probably make me lose sleep the most. We've had an incredibly challenging year with unprecedented difficulties, but I'm really happy to be here today because I think this work represents a point of real optimism and possibility. And so with that, I want to just explain, kind of give you a roadmap of the day. We're going to hear from several notable speakers who are going to first introduce and set the context for this work. And then you're going to hear directly from the Office of Civic and Community Engagement, Jen Posner and Robin Bakken. And they're going to present on the work that they've been undertaking for the past 2 years on their Housing Resiliency and Sustainable South Florida project. This work builds upon the office's long-standing commitment to providing policy and research expertise on affordable housing as well as climate resilience. And I know so many of you who are attending today have longstanding commitments to these issues as well. As an overview, first you're going to hear from Maria Escorcia, who is the relationship manager for global philanthropy in Southeast Florida for JP Morgan Chase and Company. And I want to, I really can't overstate the important role that Maria has played specifically herself in her leadership, building capacity in our community through countless nonprofit organizations for addressing affordable housing. She has been, that the work she is spearheading is really helping to change the ecosystem of how we address these critical issues. So it's a delight to be able to introduce her today. After Maria, I'm also very excited that we'll be hearing from the newly elected mayor of Miami-Dade County, Mayor Daniela Levine Cava. And I think, as almost every one of you knows, she's a longtime champion of both climate resilience and affordable housing in Miami, which, she has a long track record of demonstrated work, improving Miamians' quality of life as both the founder and leader of Catalyst Miami for so many years, as well as a commissioner at in Miami-Dade County, and now as our newly elected mayor. So we're very grateful for her tireless commitment and support. And then following Mayor Levine Cava, we'll hear from Jim Murley, who is the Chief Resilience Officer of Miami-Dade County. And as many of you know, Jim is an incredibly thoughtful and groundbreaking leader in creating policy that affects and improves our affordability and our resilience. And his leadership and just positive collaborative spirit have been so important to improving the fabric of our work and our ecosystem here, and has really brought Miami's efforts to the world stage. So we'll end our time together with a panel discussion moderated by Alex Harris. Alex has highlighted the criticality of climate change and sustainability to millions of readers through her great work at the Miami Herald. And she has a piece posted today that highlights some of the work you're about to hear about. So please check that out at miamiherald.com. And she's really been covering this unprecedented hurricane season, as well as the increasing risks that flooding poses to South Florida. So we're grateful for her as well and her great work. Thank you for being with us today. And at this moment, I would love to pass it on to Maria Escorcia, Relationship Manager for Southeast Florida, for global philanthropy, excuse me, in Southeast Florida for JP Morgan Chase & Co.
Thank you, Annie. I know it's a mouthful, but thank you for the introduction, and thank you for your kind words. I really appreciate it. And hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here with all of you today at the launch of this much anticipated mapping tool. As we know, communities around the world are struggling to manage the impacts of natural disasters, such as severe weather and wildfires, which are being exacerbated by climate change. At JP Morgan Chase, we continue to work hard to help communities prepare to withstand these threats. In addition to our longstanding commitment to promoting inclusive economic growth in Miami, in 2019, our firm committed nearly $3 million to help certain at-risk communities, including Miami, become more resilient in the face of a natural disaster. Today's announcement is an important step in reducing the impact of extreme weather events and natural disasters on our most vulnerable communities. And we know that natural disasters disproportionately impact the most vulnerable communities. That has added more urgency to the development of affordable and sustainable housing in Miami. The successful development of the MAP tool we are collectively sharing today has led us to want to do more. So today, JP Morgan Chase is pleased to announce an additional grant of $500,000 to the University of Miami Office of Civic and Community Engagement to create a heat mapping feature on top of the map tool that you will see today that will show heat impacts and the needs for safe and equitable access to outdoor spaces. Additionally, this new grant will enable the University of Miami to create a toolkit of innovative community engagement strategies focused on equitable climate resilience. The work that UM is sharing today can be used locally by Miami's community organizations and policymakers to strengthen their work and reach even more targeted populations in need. Also, this will be a tool that can be replicated in other communities facing similar shocks and stresses. We at JP Morgan Chase are proud of the work being discussed today and the work to come through our successful partnership with the University of Miami. With that, I'm so honored to introduce Miami-Dade County's Mayor, Daniela Levine-Cava.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Maria, for that introduction. And thank you to all the leaders and the participants here today, helping to lead our community forward on this critical topic. Special thank you to all of you at JP Morgan Chase for your continued investments in our community. Here in Miami-Dade County, we are truly at the forefront of this global climate crisis. To us, the consequences of inaction in the face of rising sea levels are not a far off abstraction, but a growing reality of everyday life. We can't afford to view resilience as a standalone policy area. All policy in Miami-Dade County is resiliency policy. And this is particularly true for how we think about the future of housing and the impacts that rising sea levels will have on our ability to provide housing to all of our residents. As it stands today, Miami-Dade has one of the nation's highest percentages of renters who spend more than half their income on housing. A recent study also found that local flooding has increased 400% in the past 10 years. For that reason, it has never been more important to integrate our housing policy with our resiliency policy. Launched in 2015, the Miami Affordability Project, or MAP, sought to do exactly that. And it has since revolutionized how we deal with the intersectionality between climate change and the affordability of housing. For those of you who are new to MAP, it is a fantastic open access research tool that has more than 200 filters that we can use to sort through local, state, and federal data on affordable housing. And specifically, MAP helps us to do 3 key things: analyze the distribution of available housing units, track the housing needs of our residents, and evaluate their cost burdens. Thanks to a generous $300,000 grant from JP Morgan Chase, we are now able to expand this program and add new filters which will show the future impacts of sea level rise on subsidized rental housing. This will be an invaluable tool for us in helping us to mitigate the threat of rising sea levels and how they are affecting our housing stock. Currently, MAP tracks more than 43,000 affordable housing units in Miami-Dade County, and thousands more are in the works, thanks to our county's closing in on 10,000 summit last fall. However, while 43,000 units might sound like a lot, Miami-Dade actually has one of the nation's biggest shortages of affordable housing. MAP is helping us to turn this around. The Miami Housing Policy Toolkit helps us to create mitigation and adaptation solutions for specific neighborhoods. For example, we can see which communities are on low-lying ground. We can also see which older developments need to be retrofitted for the future. And this helps us to make smart cost-benefit decisions. We can then decide which projects to prioritize. MAP's new Resiliency Policy Toolkit lets us look at innovative work being done in the US and abroad. This gives local officials a bird's eye view of how to create better policies. MAP's resilience tools also help real estate developers make wise decisions. We can see where creative designs are needed to deal with the risks of rising seas. And public-private partnerships can help us to quickly meet new housing needs. We can leverage the local funding to get the biggest bang for our buck, and local dollars can then help us secure state and federal funding too. Later today in the Q&A section, Director Michael Liu of the Public Housing and Community Development Department in the county will show us how his team works with their magic in Miami-Dade's Public Housing Department. MAP's new tools also help our county promote social justice. This is one of my main goals in my new administration. In Miami-Dade County, we want to make sure that all families have roofs over their heads. Before MAP, anyone trying to figure out where to build public housing had to sift through thousands of property records. They had to look at publicly owned lands and public transportation maps and where good jobs were located. And now, in the blink of an eye, MAP crunches all these numbers and houses them in one place. Not only is this helpful in laying out what we need to do to shore up our existing stock of housing, but it will also help us make decisions about where to build new units. Our county's Office of Resilience helps us put together all the pieces of this puzzle, connecting the dots between the work done by county government and the work done by community partners. Miami-Dade will soon release updates on these projects, including the county's sea level rise strategy, our Greenprint 2.0 on water and electricity efficiency, and the first annual progress report for our Resilient 305 strategy. This is actually the umbrella framework of all of our county's work. I want to thank everyone who helped with MAP, including University of Miami's Housing Solutions Lab, University of Miami's Office of Community and Civic Engagement, and all the tech wizards behind the scenes, everyone at UM Center of Computational Science. You are all unsung heroes. And of course, a big shout out to our partners outside of UM, including the South Florida Community Land Trust and Catalyst Miami. I'm so proud of everyone who's helping. We are all rolling up our sleeves to pitch in to make sure that affordable housing is truly affordable for everyone, everywhere. I now hand the mic over to Jim Murley. He is Miami-Dade's Chief Resilience Officer, and he will share more details on our community collaborations. Thank you and God bless.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for the introduction. And we're so happy and pleased to be part of an administration that is focused on the issues we're going to talk about this afternoon. But as we all know, something the entire community is struggling with now is COVID-19. And our mayor is today launching a countywide awareness campaign to beat this deadly virus. And she's She's got a can-do attitude about this. She feels that if we adapt to this, like the many other challenges and stresses we deal with in our community, we will thrive. So we're really pleased, even with her own challenges of dealing with this COVID-19 illness, that she continues to lead us on these issues. We're here today to discuss UM's Office of Civic and Community Engagement's new tool, in addition to Matt. And let me add my appreciation to Maria, to JP Morgan Chase for the additional funding that you just announced that is going to keep this whole project moving forward. The mayor pointed out that social justice is a major focus for her, along with climate change. And she's made organizational changes to really provide us a focus for that in the future. She's added new senior policy positions and engagement and performance, and also policy. So I think these offices, as they emerge, as their roles are clarified, and we have an opportunity to work with all of our departments, there's going to be tremendous opportunity to use the data and tools that are made forward in this project to improve the affordable housing opportunities throughout our community. During the process of producing the resiliency toolkit and the additional data, our office had opportunity to work directly with the folks in the overview committee and to work with the stakeholders. It was a great opportunity. We had subject matter experts from all over provide assistance. And I think the end, we're going to have an enhanced map process, which will prepare us holistically to change the infrastructure and much needed updates to our county land use policies. It'll also allow the Office of Resilience to block by block and neighborhood by neighborhood to create new partnerships to strengthen the longstanding collaboration that makes our county more resilient. Academic teamwork throughout Miami-Dade gives us the intellectual muscle and might we need to accomplish bold plans to deal with rising seas, climate change, and affordable housing. So I thank the Office of Community and Civic Engagement, all of UN, for all your work and collaboration. We all know that in regard to climate change, we have lots to do ahead of us. We also have a fantastic team within the county government, academia, and our many community and not-for-profit partners to help us accomplish this. We will be rolling out reports. Those reports that the mayor mentioned will provide vehicles that we can use the data and tools that are being talked about today, and we'll be able to move forward in the years ahead. In closing, I want to repeat the mayor's motto on how we tackle the huge challenges ahead of us. We can adapt and we will thrive. I now have the pleasure of turning over the mic to Robin Bakken, who leads this wonderful Office of Civic and Community Engagement, in addition to being an assistant provost and a professor of history at UM. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Jim. We're really grateful for you being here today. I'd like to thank everyone who's here today. We're really grateful to have so many people really just who've contributed in a number of ways. You'll hear from a variety of our stakeholders today. First, I'd really like to thank Annie Lord for hosting us. We're so grateful for all of our collaboration with Miami Homes for All. Of course, Mayor Levine Cava for offering those opening remarks, and to Jim for being such a wonderful partner. I'd like to thank our amazing staff at the Office of Civic and Community Engagement, as well as our grant partners on this work. Karen Bolter from Arcadis, Landolph Road Barbarigos from the College of Engineering, and UM's Institute for Data Science and Computing. And finally, of course, we're especially grateful to our sponsor, JP Morgan Chase & Company, and our program officer, Maria Escorcia, for all of their support and collaboration throughout the development of our project, the Miami Housing Solutions Lab. The Solutions Lab is a free interactive online mapping tool that uses big data and innovative mapping technology to visualize the landscape of housing affordability in South Florida and present a range of policy solutions. So as you heard, what we'd like to do today is give you a brief overview of the update to our signature tool in the lab, MAP, or the Miami Affordability Project, and its new capacity to highlight the relationship between two of Miami's most significant challenges, sea level rise and affordable housing. Well, as we all know, Miami is one of the most unaffordable cities, not just in the nation, but in the world, as you can see from this affordability gap chart. The Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard released its State of the Nation's Housing Report just last month, and Miami maintains its dubious distinction of having the highest share of severely cost-burdened renters in the country. That is, renters paying 50% or more of their income on housing. Now, in addition to managing an affordable housing crisis, Miami also is known as ground zero for climate change impacts. In recent years, images like those shown here of flooding and its unwilling victims, like this poor octopus, no longer shock us. And this chart puts us solidly in the lower end of preparedness and resources when it comes to climate risk. Attention to impacts of climate change on affordable housing has gained momentum recently and underscores the importance of the work we're sharing about Miami today. Our data shows that 41% of all subsidized housing in Miami-Dade County is in a flood zone. In addition, this chart shows the number of affordable housing properties in the county that will be impacted by sea level rise by decade and by county commission district. So the problem statement becomes very clear. What can Miami do to protect against the inevitable burdens of sea level rise and flooding on its most vulnerable residents? So our office has built the Miami Housing Solutions Lab in order to address these issues. The lab includes multiple tools to address housing affordability and equitable development. The housing policy timeline outlines innovative and is an interactive walk through nearly 100 years of Miami's housing development history. The Housing Policy Toolkit outlines innovative policies, programs, and strategies from around the country that can be adapted to the Miami market to prevent displacement and promote affordable housing. Our tool LAND, or Land Access for Neighborhood Development, provides users with information on vacant or underutilized parcels that are owned by municipalities, faith-based organizations, or larger institutions that could be utilized for affordable housing. And that brings us to today's focus, the Miami Affordability Project, a free interactive online map that spatializes the distribution of affordable housing and housing need in Miami. By adding elevation and sea level rise data to this platform, we have created the first mapping tool focused on South Florida to explore in tandem the issues of affordable housing and climate change so we can more equitably and effectively promote urban resilience. We've also created a companion policy toolkit with suggestions and best practices for resilient affordable housing. Our hope is that these robust data tools offered for free will help to facilitate equitable resilience strategies in policy planning. Throughout the development of this project, we were fortunate to have the involvement of many leading thinkers on climate, resiliency, and community equity as part of our stellar stakeholder group. This way, we could ensure that the data and policy solutions are in the hands of activists and planners, and policymakers and elected officials, so that we propose equitable and effective resilience strategies. So it is now my pleasure to turn this over to my colleague, Jennifer Posner, who is our program manager for affordable housing and resiliency. So Jen, over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Robin. As we've heard from Robin and so many of our other speakers, we know that the most at-risk members of our communities often experience the greatest losses from climate-related hazards and events. And it's really exciting to be part of a community that's working to tackle this in complementary ways. Recent work from Climate Central, Enterprise Community Partners, and others validates the need for equitable climate-sensitive development. The new updates to MAP that I'll show you today will enable municipal agencies, community-based organizations, affordable housing developers, and others to assess climate-related vulnerabilities to existing properties and identify lower risk areas where new affordable housing can be considered. And the evolution of MAP to align our longstanding work in affordable housing with climate risk offers a really great opportunity to cultivate conversations about these two issues together. So let me walk you through the tool. When you get to MAP, this is the screen that you'll be greeted by. A legend at the bottom will auto-populate as you add information to the map from the various layers. We've organized the information into categories called layers that can be easily visualized in different combinations. I'll walk you through these layers and show you how they can work together. First, this is our subsidized housing layer. The pink dots represent the public housing operated by housing agencies, and the purple are assisted subsidized housing. This data is provided for Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. We can further refine the information on this map to show, for example, the owner type. So these are all nonprofit developers and ownership, or the population that is served. For example, these are properties that serve farm workers. By using the search bar at the top, we can search for a number of properties, different subsidy programs. I'm going to look for RAD conversions. And this will bring up all of the sites that are slated for renovation by PHCD through HUD's Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. This program ensures that redeveloped public housing will be hardened to make it more resilient, an objective that was outlined in the Resilient 305 plan released last year. The next layer, census tracts, provides demographic information down to the census tract level. For those of you who've used our tool in the past, you will notice that this has really been streamlined to make it more user-friendly. And we have the option to look at data either by percentage or as actual numbers. And we've included demographics that can help underscore areas of disinvestment, overcrowding, and other limiting factors in providing adequate housing. We can also look at things like the age of buildings, which is a particularly useful indicator when assessing housing that was built with the post-Hurricane Andrew building code modifications, which created stronger building protocols. I'll look under the age of structure, and I can click on the percentage of buildings that were constructed between 1990 and 2009, which gives us a rough approximation of post-Andrew. The areas in red show areas where over 75% of the buildings were built between 1990 and 2009, and then are therefore largely compliant with post-Andrew code requirements. In the tracts that are highlighted in green, less than 25% of the housing was built after 1990, which indicates an older housing stock that may be less resilient to climate change. You can click on a census tract of interest to get a drill down with a really rich data snapshot for this particular area. This data can also provide relevant information about population and other kinds of demographics. An organization like Healthy Little Havana, for example, could filter for households to find households with someone age 65 or over to help them inform their health impact assessments that they're developing. Again, over 75% of the households in red are home to someone over 65, information which can help shape policy and programmatic decisions. Next, we'll look at the communities layer, which provides parcel level land use data for the neighborhoods we have studied. We can identify trends that may be shaped by environmental factors or use it to identify optimal sites for potential new resilient affordable housing development. A user like the South Florida Housing Link Collaborative, for example, looking to identify vacant or underutilized land could use this layer for this kind of analysis. So for example, we'll look at Little Haiti, which is along the rail line, which is one of their other objectives. We can zoom in, and this shows the land use for this neighborhood. On the legend, you can see yellow is residential, red commercial, purple industrial, and so on. We can further filter this though to just look at vacant properties. And then what we've done in this new iteration of MAP that makes this even more targeted is that we have new filters to make this analysis even more specific. So for example, we know the average elevation in Miami is a little under 7 feet. So let's look for properties between 10 to 15 feet that could give better flooding resilience in the long run. So we'll just enter this into the box and that will pop that up. And then we can refine this even more if we want to look at lot size, to look for larger lots that could enable swifter development. So I'll look at 10,000 to 30,000 square foot lots. We can click on one of these developments, one of the properties rather. There we go. And this pulls up, again, a deeper dive into the ownership and land use information. And now it also includes the actual elevation and the FEMA flood zone. And now we'll look at the resiliency layer, the newest layer. And this is really where all of this information can be interwoven to tell really powerful stories about climate equity and risk that we couldn't see before. This information can help prioritize and optimize investment decisions, factoring in relative risk assessment. So this is the elevation. This shows the ground height above sea level. The darker areas represent parts of Miami with the highest elevation above sea level, and the lighter areas are the lower lying. At a glance, we can layer on top of this the assisted and public housing developments. And this allows us to quickly identify pockets that are most susceptible to increased flooding. For example, properties along the lower lying Miami River, and then further south into South Dade, which is also lower in elevation. Map land use and property ownership data also allows sophisticated filtering to identify where development pressure and gentrification trends may be shaped by environmental considerations. So we can do a tailored search. We'll go back to the communities layer, and this time let's look at Little Havana. Oops. And we'll zoom in to get a little closer look. We know that 1 or 2 family homes that are owned by business entities can be indicative of speculative real estate investors who may be looking to redevelop. So with this communities layer, we can look at property appraiser data to get a really refined view of this. So we can look specifically for 1 and 2 unit buildings. And we can further refine this again, going back down to the elevation. And we can look for properties that are above 12 feet, for example. Now, this is a little hard to see. So let's go over to our background layers, and we can click on this, which is a aerial photograph. So this gives us an even better opportunity to see adjacencies with other land uses. Next, we can go to the resiliency layer and identify at a click of a button which properties are within the FEMA flood zones. These lighter purple are A flood zones, which are moderate to high risk, and the V coastal flood zones, which are moderate to high risk. And these are zones designated by the Federal Emergency Management Agency and dictate the insurance requirements. We can also look at sea level rise and how that might impact potential property decisions. This we mapped using approximations from the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compact. And we have this in 20-year increments. This is 2060, 2080, and 2100. The lightest blue color shows the lowest, and here is 0 to 1 feet of sea level rise. And the depth increases in intensity with darker shades of blue. Another relevant indicator that we've included is storm surge, which is a rise in seawater during a storm that can cause extreme flooding. To model potential storm surge, we looked at the path of Hurricane Andrew because it was a powerful storm that people remember and can relate to. We factored in sea level rise projections and extrapolated Andrew's path to give a general sense of where surge levels could rise in coming decades. And this is going again, 2040, 2060, 2080, and 2100. Again, the lighter colors are a surge up to 3 feet, and these darker colors indicate higher surge levels. To be clear, storm surge is incredibly variable and can change depending on multiple factors. Nevertheless, it's worthwhile to consider a storm like Andrew to visualize the potential outcomes that another powerful storm could bring in the future. This kind of information helps nonprofits cite new affordable housing that can be most resilient. In fact, this information is consistent with the resilience development criteria that were outlined in the Miami-Dade Affordable Housing Framework that was released by Miami Homes for All last summer. The framework also included a goal of identifying housing opportunities within a CRA or entitlement jurisdictions. And this is where our boundaries layer can help. So I'm going to go back to our regular background here, and then we can go to the boundaries layer. This layer provides boundaries for all of the city commission districts, county commission districts, all 34 municipalities in Miami-Dade County, and the CRA boundaries. Planners and legislative aides can use this overlay to generate a quick snapshot of the environmental and affordable housing trends in a particular district or neighborhood. So let's take a look at the County District 6 boundaries. This covers Little Haiti, Liberty City, Overtown, and other neighborhoods. We can at a glance look at all of the public housing that's within that district. And then we can look at the flood risk. So we can overlay the flood zones that are within that district. We can filter this even further by going back to the census tract information. And we can look at the areas where residents have the highest cost burden, where residents are spending more than a third of their income on housing. So the red outlines show areas where over 75% of renters are cost burdens, and yellow is 25 to 50. And any of these census tract data points can be overlaid on this to give a really tailored, nuanced snapshot of a particular area. So in just a few clicks, we can visualize the environmental pressures on the most cost burden vulnerable populations in a specific area. We can also use this information to help organizations like Dade Heritage Trust and local planners to identify specific historic sites that might be at higher risk of damage or loss due to flooding. So we'll look at these are all the orange and brown are the designated or potential historic sites. And then we can look at this with the 2080 sea level rise projections. So we can, zoom in here and click on one of the points and we get a full description and photo of that area. So this is a very, very quick run through of the tool. We're really excited for you all to use it and share with us what you're finding on it. There's really limitless possibilities, but I hope you will take a look at it and kind of play around. I'd just like to share 3 main takeaways about what we think makes this so important. First, we're collecting data at a very granular data level to show the risk of sea level rise and flooding to affordable housing, which hasn't been available as free, publicly accessible data in South Florida before. Second, this tool provides information that enables planners to easily embed climate risk into considerations for expanding and adapting safe housing stock for our most vulnerable communities. Third, and this is really exciting, this is really only the first step. With the generosity of JP Morgan and Maria, we can adapt this tool to be responsive to community data needs and our stakeholders' recommendation to map things like heat indicators and identify neighborhoods that are at high risk of public health issues. So I will now turn it back over to Annie.
Well, I wish that we were all in person because I wish that we could all give a really vociferous round of applause to the University of Miami and to JP Morgan Chase. This work is breathtaking. I mean, both sobering, but also, gives me at least a lot of reason for hope. Unfortunately, we have to look at the problem in its face and understand it with specificity in order to address it. And so I just I'm so impressed and grateful for everybody who worked on this because yes, it is, the possibilities really are limitless in understanding how we can best address our affordability needs, but do so in a way that is that's going to be long lasting and is going to help Miami survive and live on, even as the effects of climate change are felt. So congratulations to the team, and Maria, once again, thank you for your leadership and all of those who funded this important work. So with that, I would really like to pass it off to Alex Harris, again, a wonderful journalist with Miami Herald, who has been covering the effects of climate change here in Miami, and in a piece today covering this important work and its intersection with affordable housing. Alex is going to lead a wonderful panel of leaders in a Q&A. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you so much, Annie, for the great introduction. And yeah, happy to be here today and talk about this important topic with all of you. We're going to be having a great conversation with Michael Liu, the Director of Public Housing and Community Development Department with Miami-Dade, Myra Cruz with Catalyst Miami, and Dr. Amy Clement. So I figured we would probably start with Amy, who I know also, and I'm sure many of you do too, from the City of Miami's Climate Resilience Committee. She is the chair of the committee, and we talk a lot, I hear them talk a lot about climate gentrification, a topic we haven't really touched on yet today, and the intersection between affordable housing and sea level rise has come up at those meetings. So Amy, I was wondering if, considering those two roles you have, as a climate scientist and on the Climate Resilience Committee, how do you see tools like this new layer on that project being an effective way you can engage with the community and come up with solutions on this board?
Thanks, Alex, and thank you all. Jen, that was a whirlwind tour, and I'm sure there's so much work that went into it, but it is amazing to be able to see all that demonstrated in one place. And Alex, congrats on your article today in the Herald, so that's good timing. Alex mentioned my role as the chair of the Climate Resilience Advisory Board to the City of Miami, and in particular how that role dovetails with my work as a researcher on climate science. And what I think is the most important thing, and I think this MAP project is a really excellent demonstration of it, is that I feel like my role on that committee is to try to enhance the research capacity and the access to research tools that whether it's the city or the county or other decision-making bodies can have. And I'll give you a couple examples of projects that we have going on where we are specifically trying to do this, and Robin and Jen are involved in a number of these projects as well. One thing I wanted to mention first was a group that I'm involved with here at the University of Miami that is funded by ULink, which is our university, started by our provost, University Laboratory on Integrated Knowledge. And we have a group that's focused on hyperlocal climate adaptation. So as Jen mentioned, the granularity of how these climate impacts unravel, and that's you can see that in the maps that she showed. And in addition to that, I think there's other layers that add to not only the exposure but also the risks associated with that. So things like demographic data, health data Jen mentioned. And so our work there is to try to zero in on particular communities and try to engage with communities using innovative tools that we've developed, and including mapping tools such as the MAP project. And I can talk more about that project, but basically is using, it's a very focused community engagement tool where we have people taking photographs of their neighborhoods and bringing them into a workshop to explain what kind of community strengths and threats there are that they actually see with their eyes. And then there's the second part to it, which is actually using a design thinking method in order to, given those strengths and threats, to try to build out solutions. And so that group, which is actually there's partners here, Myra Cruz and Catalyst Miami is a partner, Cleo, who I think is on the call as well, partners, the city City of Miami and Miami-Dade County are also involved. And I think that's the kind of example of where we can actually take these kind of maps that the office that Robin and Jen and their group have generated and actually engage citizens in a very concrete way in order to address problems that they are facing right now and also moving forward in the future. So that's kind of a long answer. I don't want to take up too much time. If I have more time, I'll talk also about a Resilient 305 collaborative that we've developed with FIU, Miami-Dade College, and supported by Jim Murley in the county, as well as the Miami Foundation. But let me just pause there because that was a lot of talking, and I'll kick it back to you, Alex, if you want to follow up on any of those points. I'm happy to elaborate even more.
Absolutely, and thank you, Amy. That project where you're having people take the photos of the adaptation that they need in their neighborhood is really fascinating, and I can't wait to hear more about that in the future. And just as a quick pause point here, the format is I'm going to be asking our panelists a couple of questions, but as always, we do want to save time for audience questions. So please use the Q&A function, and you can go ahead and send that in, and I will ask some of those questions once we get through a couple more of these. So I'd like to move to Director Liu for the next question. And when we think about what we just saw, Jennifer showing us with the map function and all of these new abilities and this new data we have available, how do you think that information could be useful for your department and their adaptation strategies and planning on how to prepare for sea level rise?
Well, the timing is perfect for us as we embark upon our rental assistance demonstration, redevelopment of all of our public housing sites, over 6,500 units. That'll translate to anywhere from 12 to 20,000 units overall. And the granular nature of the information will really help us hold our developer partners accountable for what we will ask them to be doing in our solicitations regarding these redevelopments. So I think that's the biggest takeaway and the biggest value that this new feature of the map tool will allow us to proceed upon. I mean, before we could talk in generalities and we would have general maps, but nothing specific enough to really incorporate into our solicitations. And if there's one thing that we all should know is that I love our developer partners, but bottom line is if you don't apply points for specific amenities or technologies that you want included and do not really lay them out, you're not going to get it. And this allows us to actually incorporate that specificity in our RFPs, RFQs, et cetera. So I'm really excited about this new development, and we are going to have roundtables on this with our development partners, as well as with our residents and resident councils. They need to be brought into the fold also and know that this is available.
Absolutely. It sounds like this tool can help you figure out what to ask for your development partners. Thank you very much. And let's go to Myra. Myra, Catalyst obviously is one of the models in the community for how do you talk to residents about climate change, adaptation, and a lot of other issues. How do you convince people here are the available solutions and empower them to have the agency to go out and advocate for the solutions they like? How do you think that this new feature will help you talk to community groups or empower them to be able to ask for what they like and when it comes to solutions here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it'll be immensely useful. We have two different leadership training programs. One is called CLEAR, which is a climate leadership training program, and one is called HEAL, which is an affordable housing training program. So this tool really will help to advance the work that we're doing through both those programs. It really addresses the resilience and affordable housing issues. With those programs and the work that we do on the ground, we always want to ensure that our community members are empowered through learning, through gaining the knowledge to be able to advocate on these different issues and to advocate for solutions that they care about. And that address the issues that they see in their communities. So actually having a tool like this where now they can go and see what is going on in their neighborhood, how it could be impacted by sea level rise and storm surge. It really empowers them to know what's happening, but also they can go to their county commissioner and say, hey, there's this empty lot near me. This would be a great opportunity to maybe put up some infrastructure that will help us with our affordable housing issues, but also we can make it more resilient, that there's a need for that. So I think this will really go a long way to helping to close those gaps that we've seen, where maybe, a community member asked us, like, what do we do? Like, how do we know where there's like an empty lot of space near us that we can use in a way that's impactful, that increase our resilience? Now we have a tool where they can easily go and be empowered to use this. And in tandem with our leadership training programs, they're getting the knowledge that they need to understand what they're seeing. They should understand what storm surge is. So now they can really put everything together in one fell swoop while they're looking at this tool, and be able to go off on their own or with their support or with others to advocate for solutions in their community. So it'll be immensely useful.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like the parcel level data will really allow you to do hyper local solutions instead of just saying, we prefer the idea of bioswales. You can say, we want one right here. That sounds like a really good use of this. All right, thank you so much, Myra. I'm gonna move it back to Amy real fast, and I'd like to, return to the Climate Resilience Committee again. Is there any, you think, specific data that you can pull from the MAP project that will be useful in the work the committee does in coming up with propositions for the city or recommendations? Maybe, like I mentioned earlier, climate gentrification. I know that's a topic that's come up a couple of times.
Yeah, I think that the Robin and her group have already presented to the Climate Resilience Committee, and the immediate reaction was excitement. I think that in two ways. One is to be able to visualize problems, and that alone, just the act of making the maps, really helps. And two, to be able to realize that this as a resource is already available and in an easily digestible form. I'll make a note about tech wizards. I think that the capacity that universities can bring to these kinds of problems is providing access to indirect access to these resources like the data science center that we have at the University of Miami. I wanted to go back to the topic of the topic of the just announced grant and heat, which I think is a really is growing in terms of interest in Miami, and in a way I think is just as important of an issue as flooding in terms of its impact on the people living here. And I think there's a big data gap there, and I think that this is a great opportunity that the office is embarking upon this, and there's lots of other groups that are, or at least a few other groups that are building in this area as well. So in terms of data, the guidance that about how heat impacts humans is very focused on northern cities. And so heat coming in waves and then dissipating. And obviously that is not an issue. That is not how we experience heat here in Miami. And so I think there's a great opportunity to bring both the data and both the physical data in terms of exposure and the health data in terms of impacts together. And this is the time to do it. In the last 10 years, some of our analysis has shown that the number of days of excessive heat exposure, the number of hours per day of excessive heat exposure in the summer has doubled in the 2000s compared to the last century. And so we're really looking at higher levels of heat exposure. And then the granularity question really comes in because heat exposure is not the same everywhere. I know we all experience that here in Miami. If you go from one wooded place, you can, or shaded place, that you can have a very different heat experience than a very areas without a lot of shade. And so I applaud that the grant from JP Morgan Chase going to the group, and I look forward to learning what the group has to offer, that and being able to, and hopefully participating, the being able to deliver that information in a way that makes sense for the impacts is really great. So look forward to that next step.
Absolutely. And let's pass it to Robin real fast for a moment to kind of talk a little bit more about that project. Robin, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to add that the reason that we put together this grant kind of as we were coming to the tail end of the one that we're doing right now was that in our stakeholder groups, when we talked about the climate issues that we wanted to address with regard to affordable housing, flooding, sea level rise, and storm surge, our stakeholder groups and our advocates, repeatedly said, well, what about heat, right? Heat is such an important climate impact overall, but specifically here in Miami. And so that's why it was so important for us to think, bigger and more broadly about the intersections of climate impact and community development and equity. And there's actually a project at the University of Richmond and Virginia Commonwealth where they've done heat mapping and overlaid that on top of historic segregation maps. And you can basically see, almost parcel by parcel, the overlay of where there's tremendous heat impact with historic segregation in cities across the country. And so just as you said, Amy, the way that we're able to get to this sort of granular level of neighborhood issues around climate and access to affordable housing, we want to do that around heat. So we can really factor in all of these different indicators and components to really craft more effective strategies for urban resilience.
Just want to jump in real quick, Robin, and we had conducted workshops this summer on this photo voice, and that was, I think that one of the top things that people brought out about their neighborhoods was tree canopy, and in particular the overlay between tree canopy and public transportation. And so there's some real opportunities there to understand where exposures are.
Thanks, you guys. I think that's a really fascinating topic, maybe worth its own whole other hour. But I'd love to go to audience questions real fast. We've got one from Christian Kamrath right now, and it's open to any of the panel, so just let me know if you'd like to respond. Aside from funding, what do you view as the biggest barrier within the county to build resilient, affordable housing? Sounds like it might be for Myra or Director Liu.
I can just quickly say that I think the incentives aren't really there for developers to build affordable housing or to do it in a way that's sustainable and resilient. So I think that is a huge barrier that I hope we can wrap our head around and be able to really incentivize truly resilient, affordable housing that meets the needs of community members that they're asking for.
Well, I would say that it still is money, and we need always more of it, but also a willingness of developers to experiment with technologies and materials that are actually going to bring down the cost of construction. There is a real hesitancy in the building community to use different materials, new approaches. I don't blame them, but we have to push them to be more creative on the actual construction front.
Thank you guys for that. I think we have time for maybe one more question. This one's from Jennifer Woolman, sort of a follow-up on that. What local and county laws or ordinances are hindering housing construction and resiliency, and which ones are helping or encouraging it? Probably for Director Liu, it sounds like.
Well, the good news is that I think post Andrew and currently even now, we have some good, strong county and local ordinances to help us out. So, we look forward to that. There are some incentives in the RAD program, which is very helpful to us. Also in regards to incentivizing developers to use green energy efficient technologies. And in so doing, they will increase the amount of contract rents that HUD will provide them. So, I have to be an optimist, so I look on the upside of things in this regard.
like to look on the upside of things. I think that might be all the time we have. I see we've come up upon the 2 o'clock hour. I think I'm gonna thank our panelists for answering these great questions. Thank you, the audience, for submitting some excellent ones. And I'm gonna hand it over to Annie Lord again. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much, Alex and Mr. Liu, Myra, and all the panelists. Amy, really appreciate your guidance and participation here today. Thank you all so much for spending your afternoon with the University of Miami and so many great leaders, and we hope you have a wonderful day.